Hey guys, it's Mr. Light. I'm here at Lock and Dam number 15. Today we're going to learn all about how humans can affect the river based on these lock systems going up and down. It's really cool, and I got lots of cool stuff to show you. I'm here with Mike McKean. He's a ranger for the Army Corps of Engineers. I can't wait for you guys to hear what he has to say. He knows all about the Mississippi and definitely all about the Lock and Dam.
So yeah, thanks for having me. So we're sitting here at Locks and Dam number 15. 15 of 29 locks and dams that are on the Mississippi River. But before we talk about that, the different locks and dams, we need to talk about kind of why they're here, and specifically this one, Locks and Dam 15. So we used to have rapids here on the Mississippi River, and in this particular area, pretty much from where Rock Island Davenport is today all the way up to pretty much where LeClaire, Iowa is, this historically was known on the Mississippi as the Rock Island Rapids. And it was considered one of the most dangerous parts of the river to try to run a vessel through, something like a steamboat. So different projects took place, the largest of which was called the 9-Foot Channel Project. And that helped basically, or gave authority to build locks and dams to make the river easier to navigate and make things deeper, if you will. And that 9-Foot Channel Project pretty much started right here at Locks and Dam 15. All right, so behind me here, we're still looking at the Lock and Dam, and also kind of a unique feature that happens to be built on top of the dam. It was here before the Lock and Dam is the government bridge, and you kind of see a train kind of distancing off now as we're talking about. So that's a whole nother type of transportation that's very effective way to move goods throughout the country, even still today. So what kind of stuff moves, kind of going back to the Mississippi, what kind of stuff, cargo, moves on the Miss? And basically a lot of grain. Think where we're at, right in the heart of the Midwest. And the Mississippi, as you've already learned, runs, from the Twin Cities all the way down, well, even farther, but, commercial navigation runs from the Twin Cities all the way down to New Orleans. So you have a long distance that you can collectively get stuff moved to the river, loaded up on a barge, and then transporting it all the way down to the ocean, where all of a sudden you have access to the entire world, essentially, by the oceans and things like that. So big thing that moves on the Mississippi is grain of all sorts, but mainly corn and soybeans are kind of the big two. We also see some wheat moving up and down the river, mainly down. We see coal kind of coming up, feeding power plants in some other areas. We see all sorts of chemicals of varying kinds, ranging from fertilizer to cleaning chemicals. We have sand, salt, we have gravel, different building materials like that. So all sorts of stuff, mainly in bulk. The bulk commodities are moving up and down the river. Things like cattle, not so much. They wouldn't enjoy that ride, because when a tow is out with all their barges, they're usually out for a couple weeks at a time in all sorts of weather, from hot to cold, rain to snow. They're traveling. So it's the bulk commodities that don't mind being in the heat, don't need to be refrigerated, and can be loaded fairly quickly on and off. If you think about how we move things, so we have planes, trains, semis, and boats, tows, and things like that. Each has their benefits and kind of drawbacks. On the Mississippi, moving stuff by tow, its greatest thing that it has going for it is you can move a lot at one time, but it doesn't move very fast. So just to give you kind of an idea of what that looks like compared to moving stuff by train or truck, we have kind of this figure behind me. So just one single barge can carry as much as 16 rail cars or 70 semi-trailers. That's just one barge. A tow on the upper Mississippi, they can carry as much as 15 barges at a time. So if you take this and times it by 15, you can do the math on your own time for that. It's a lot of stuff that's moving at one time. The drawback is the tows, they don't move generally very fast. They're averaging maybe between 5 and 8 miles an hour moving on the river, which is pretty slow compared to trains and semis, of course. but the amount of goods you're able to move at one time is why we still care and why we still use the Mississippi as a major kind of hub for moving resources. All right, so we're looking at the main chamber of Locks and Dam 15. I say main chamber because we actually have two locks here, a main chamber and an auxiliary. So what we're looking at is kind of the upper wall, and if you can kind of see kind of the two sides of the sidewalk, on the right hand side you have kind of the river level on the upstream side, and if you look kind of to the left of the sidewalk is the lower level. So the dam is creating that difference in the water level between the high and low side. And if you look kind of on the wall, because it might be hard to see in the video, but if you look on the wall in the middle, you kind of see the discoloration between kind of the lighter side towards kind of the upper side where the railing is, and the lower side kind of the darker, and that's the water line. So right now the lock is sitting on kind of the low water mark right now, and whenever the next boat happens to come through, we need to raise this water up, and so water is going to raise approximately probably about 12 to 13 feet today whenever the boat next comes through. So let's say you have this boat right here, and you have the two different levels. I don't know if you can see that real well, but two different levels in the water. So this boat wants to come upriver. And essentially what a lock is an elevator for boats. So just like an elevator, you have to have the doors open before you can ride it. Yes? Okay. So in order to do that, the captain has to call the lock, and the lock is operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have lock operators on that lock 24 hours a day, ready to do what's necessary to lock boats through. So once the captain calls in and pretty much asks permission to come in, our operators will open the gates. And you can see this level is already the same as the level inside the lock right now. So the elevator has to be on the first floor. The water also has to match what it is here. So once that happens, a horn will go off, signaling to the captain, you're okay to come in. So that boat will slowly come on in. And no one rides an elevator with the doors open, right? No, of course not. So we have to close those doors just like this. And you'll notice the doors don't shut kind of sideways. They shut a little bit upriver. And that's so that when the water goes up, that pressure actually helps keep these gates closed. So before we can raise the water, we have to open up an upper valve. So that's going to be on this side here. So if we turn that valve, basically that's going to let water flow through some tunnels underneath, and it's going to fill this chamber just by gravity. So when that happens, basically that water is going to come up. And the nice thing about water and gravity is that water is only going to get as high as it is on the other side, or the upper side. So now you're on, let's say, the second floor. In this case, the boat is ready to proceed to his next destination. So our operators are going to open up these gates, honk the horn to let the captain know, yep, you're good to go, Cap. And that boat's going to cruise on out. Gates are going to close behind. And they're ready for the next vessel whenever that happens to come through. All right, so we kind of looked upriver at the main chamber of the lock already. Now we're looking downriver, and we're kind of seeing some unique things. One is we're seeing these lower gates, and from this angle you may be able to see that they're pointed upriver just slightly. And that's for basically when the water is up, so when the two sides are different, you have a high and low side, then that high side is putting pressure on those gates, and it's actually that pressure is helping to keep those gates stay closed. So before we open the gates, we have to have the water level in the lock match the water level on the other side of the lock, so the downriver side. That way the pressure equalizes, and these gates are then going to be able to swing towards us. And so if you can kind of see in the middle, they're going to essentially break apart when they start moving, and one is going to swing over, and it's going to fit nicely inside kind of that little inlet there where the sidewalk gives, where the yellow is, and the orange cone. It's going to fit nicely in there to make it even then with the wall, so that if, let's say, a large tow is coming, which we actually do in the distance, coming upriver, then it's going to be able to sneak right through that gate without hopefully running into it too much. The other thing we're kind of seeing that's unique, especially to this lock, is the bridge that is basically right in the middle there. It's kind of separating almost the two locks, if you will. So this is the government bridge. It's been here since 1896. So it was here before the lock and dam system. As a reminder, the lock and dam here construction really didn't begin until about 1931. So this bridge was here before the lock and dam. And it's a unique bridge because not only does it have kind of the two layers, so the top layer, we had a train crossing just a little bit ago. And on the bottom layer, you have car traffic, and you can also walk and bike across as well. The really cool thing that this bridge does is it has the ability to swing. This is what we call a swing span bridge. So right in the middle, where they have that lift, that orange lift there, on the top is the bridge house, and that's where the controls are that someone is working pretty much around the clock to be able to make this bridge turn when it needs to. And at the very bottom, that's where a lot of the chains and what they call pony wheels are. So think like a carousel, this thing can turn. The reason that it has the ability to turn is anytime a large tow or any other large vessel, tall vessel I should say, needs to come through, well, it's going to be too tall and it's going to run into that bridge. So they decided to make this thing be able to turn so that it's going to have clearance so that the boat no longer has to worry about running into the bridge because the bridge got out of its way. And so then it would be free to come up in either chamber, the main or the auxiliary chamber. Now, before the lock and dam was here, it was getting out of the way of larger steamboats that would come through. So even before the lock system was here, it still had that purpose of, it's a main thoroughfare for trains to cross and people and, back in the day, horse and buggy to cross, but it needed to have the ability to get out of the way of any tall vessels that came through. Very cool bridge to see in action. So yeah, we're in luck. We have a towboat that's pushing some barges that's heading up river towards us in the distance. So what we have is our lower gates right now, they're being opened. As we mentioned earlier, these gates are opening up towards us. How that is happening is one of our operators is in one of our gate houses, and basically he's manually controlling these things opening right now. And so if, let's say, we were to have the water up, that 12 foot, you can imagine how much water would just be bursting on through and rushing through, which would be quite dangerous. And really, I don't know if the water pressure would allow for these gates to open up if we had that 12 to 13 foot head of water. My guess is probably not. So this is kind of the first step in preparation for that tow that's coming up. So far we've talked a lot about the lock here and how it works and the gates moving, but we haven't talked too much just yet about the dam. And the dam is a key part in that it's doing the job of slowing down the water and really making the river deep enough for these large vessels to come through. And again, to point out, on the wall you're kind of seeing kind of that dark water mark and that kind of lighter mark up a bit more. So we're going to raise the water probably about 12 to 13 feet. The dam, the particular style of dam that we have is what's called a roller gate dam. So it's called roller gate for kind of two main reasons. One is the shape of the gate itself. It's a giant red roller, basically a giant red cylinder, if you will. And there's 11 of these that start pretty much from our wall of the lock itself, and they go all the way over into pretty much downtown Davenport. The other reason they call it a roller gate is the river is always kind of changing levels, and so we have to be able to change the gates with that level. So these gates actually will roll up, and they can also roll down depending on if we want to let more water through or hold more water back. So if we're at a really kind of low level, let's say it hasn't rained for a couple months, something like that, our gates are going to be down quite a bit more, and that's going to back up water and keep the level up above, deeper. When we're at high levels or flooding, our gates are going to be much higher, even possibly out of the water completely, because at that point we're just letting that water flow on through. We don't want to hold any more back because it might make flooding potentially even worse. Yeah, we're obviously seeing the government bridge turning right now. The advantage of having this thing turn either clockwise or counterclockwise is this towboat right now is heading up towards us. So the bridge is swinging away from it. So that tow doesn't have to stop or wait necessarily. It can keep chugging along, and this bridge will be nice and clear before that tow even comes into the chamber. And the other thing that we can kind of see a little better now from our angle is the dam. If we pan to the right, we can see just the top of those rollers, and each of those kind of red rooftops that you're seeing is a control house that controls the gates and, you know, how high up we want to have them. But as you can see, this bridge, it moves fairly quick to make that 90-degree turn. And sometimes, you know, if it's open for quite a long time, it's not necessarily the bridge, but it's the tow that the bridge is waiting on before it can close. Because now we can really see this tow lined up, and they're 3 barges wide, which is making it about 105 feet, and our lock chamber here is about 110. So they really thread the needle. It's a tight fit when they come in. But just like that, this bridge is pretty much out of the way already, and so now it's all up to the tow boat captain and his crew, with the assistance of our lock operators on the wall kind of walking with them, for this towboat to now be coming upriver and into our Lock 15 chamber. Yeah, it can be a bit tricky, especially when they're empty like this, that as heavy as those things are, that wind can affect them pretty well, and the current definitely can too. But you can see, you know, just like that, the captain's been able to stop in place. He's got 2 motors on the back, 2 propellers, and so one can be, you know, moving forward or in basically a forward direction, one can be in reverse, and so they can kind of make the spin as you're seeing. And you can see the deckhand, or maybe you can see the deckhand on the boat just toss the line over to our lock wall, and our pole's in the way probably a little bit, but essentially they've tied off slightly to our wall. And what kind of helps them is now they have a hard line to the wall, and so that captain can then you know, manipulate his motors a bit, and he can really get himself the rear end and kind of the middle nice and close, and really, you know, right on that wall, which these are guide walls. And I don't know if you can hear it, but you might be able to hear that rope stretch a little bit too.
All right, what a fun day on the river. This was my first experience at the Lock and Dam. I've lived here 20 years and I hadn't been out here. I want to thank Mike McKean for giving us his time today and showing us all around. I learned a ton, and I know you did too. You guys have probably seen the lock or seen the dam just driving down the road. Now we know all about it and how we actually can affect the river in order to make commerce and travel all that much easier.